Good evening. Good evening to everyone joining us from around the world. I know we have a lot of interest in this webinar, and we're very excited for today. Welcome to the Young Aurora webinar. Whether you're tuning in from Europe, Africa, the Americas, Asia, or beyond, we're thrilled to have you with us for a very special conversation. My name is Colin Thomas-Jensen. I'm the Director of Impact at the Aurora Humanitarian Initiative, and it is my immense honor to serve as your moderator today. Together, we're going to hear some inspiring stories from young humanitarians who remind us that no individual, no action is too small to make a difference in the world. Young Aurora, for those of you who know a little bit about it or don't know much at all, is more than an award. It's a movement that we're building that challenges young people to act, to lead with empathy, and to believe that the ripple effect of even the smallest steps of change can have a lasting impact. So we're hoping to inspire and educate you today. Before we start, just a quick logistical comment. Please drop your questions, words of encouragement, wishes for our speakers in the Q&A and chat section. We received a number of questions up front before the session, and I'll do my very best to incorporate all those questions into our conversation. And if you've got more, you think of more, please, by all means, throw them into the mix, and we'll do our best to answer as many as we can. We're gonna start this off just to show everyone what the spirit of Young Aurora means. It means for us. We're gonna watch a short video that really gets to the heart of the program, what it stands for, and why it matters, not just to hear us here at Aurora, but we hope to the participants as well.
Engage, educate, empower.
Thank you for supporting us in making our ideas and passion a reality.
And thank you so much to the Aurora Humanitarian Initiative to give us this opportunity to be change makers in real life in our communities.
Thank you for inspiring us to become humanitarians.
Thank you for making us humanitarians.
Thank you for inspiring us to become humanitarians.
Thank you, Young Aurora, for making all of that happen.
Great. Well, with that having passed, I'd like you to please join me and my colleagues at the Aurora Humanitarian Initiative and at UWC in welcoming these extraordinary visionaries who are reshaping their communities. While the time we have today is barely enough to scratch the surface and cover all the questions we've received, we'll do our best to make this a dynamic and impactful exchange, and I'm sure it will be. I'll start by briefly introducing our speakers and then ask them to take a few moments just to talk a little bit more about their work, and then we'll dive right into the Q&A, which I expect to be a fun and educational exchange. Our first panelist is Pashtana Durrani. She's the founder of Learn Afghanistan and an international scholar in residence at Wellesley College Centers for Women in Massachusetts. Our second panelist is Wilhem Hector. He's the founder of the Hector Foundation, a UWC Red Cross Nordic alum, and a Davis UWC scholar. And he's currently studying postgraduate studies in the UK. Pashtana, I'll start with you if you want to talk a little bit about your work and how you came to be here with us today.
Thank you so much, Colin. My name is Pashtana Durrani. I am a social and political rights activist. I'm originally from Afghanistan. I did grow up in a refugee camp, so for me, the highlight is that when people are like, "Oh, were you able to access education?" I'm like, "Yeah, everybody in my village had access to education because my family was very big on education, and we had a homeschool for girls." But when I returned to Afghanistan and when I met with my own cousins as IDPs, which is internally displaced people, that's where I realized that people don't necessarily have access to education, even if it's safe. So that's like almost 8 years ago, and that's where, out of spite, I started my organization called Learn Afghanistan. But it was not just a journey where I was like, okay, nobody has access to education, I'm going to start a school. It was a very year-long journey of discovery where I was teaching my cousins, I was talking to them, and then when we enrolled them in public schools, it was of no use because the public schools were not ready to accept kids from rural conflict zones and give them those opportunities on the same level. So that is my origin story, I would say. But at the same time, I feel like over the course of years, I have seen so much um, devastating news, but also so much hope. Afghanistan's democratic government fell in 2021 August. I went into exile. Back in the day, we used to be partnered with almost 18 public schools, and now we have our own 18 schools that we run as underground schools in Afghanistan. And we almost educate 2,000 girls in person. But we also reach almost 6 million learners and users via radio, 2 million learners and users via SIM card programs. So it definitely has been one of those journeys where it has been a lot of necessity that has pushed us into a lot of innovation. And we had to think every time out of the box. If the internet is going out of the country and we are having a blackout, what do we do next? If we are not going to have access to schools anymore because a public building is being closed, what do we do next? If the teachers are being sent out of their job, what do we do next? So I think a lot of necessity has pushed us to a lot of innovation. And I continue to believe that. It has been a weird, but I think thoughtful and hopeful journey for us. Yeah.
I like the idea of necessity leading to innovation. That's something we can dig down on. Wilhem, please tell us a little bit about your background and your journey here.
Yes. Thank you, Colin. Hi, everybody. It's an honor to be here. My name is Wilhem Hector. As Colin mentioned, I am originally from Port-au-Prince, Haiti. I was born and raised there, and until my second to last year of high school. And then I moved to Norway afterward to pursue the International Baccalaureate program at UWC Red Cross Nordic. And since then, I've sort of been on a voyage to places. I've been in Norway, stayed in Europe a little bit, and studied at MIT in the US for 4 years. And now I'm in the UK, pursuing my graduate studies at Oxford. I've always been in love with education. I genuinely love school. Like, I love learning, hence why I've sort of been in school for so long. But when I left Haiti in 2019, we were sort of at the onset of deterioration of the social and political in the social and political spaces. So when I made it to Norway, I realized how lucky I was, because obviously I liked school and was working hard to offer my family a different narrative. But then I also realized that there were a ton of other kids that were extremely brilliant and talented and motivated, who did not get handed a scholarship to sort of go through more advanced opportunities. So I think at that point, when I realized how lucky I was, I kind of had a desire to do something about it. However, I did not decide to act up until I realized how easy it was to start if you started small. Because I was in UWC, I wanted to do something to help other students in Haiti to be as lucky as I was. But then the problems were big, and you didn't necessarily know how to start. And I had a conversation, I remember, with one of my teachers at UWC 4 days after I arrived, was telling me about different work that the Red Cross was doing in Norway through the summers, kind of put together like a summer program for students. And I had previously participated in summer program, and that was sort of my call to say that, you can actually just do something that something that you've already done, and you can just try to remodel it into something that can be adaptable in the Haitian context. This is how the Hector Foundation was born. 4 days after I arrived in UWC, started writing the program, and we've turned that little summer program idea into an organization over the past 4 years. Now we are focused on providing educational opportunities across Haiti, mostly on robotics and hands-on science. We've built the country's very first open use makerspace back in 2023 with the goal of sort of democratizing access to the tools of invention in the country, because we are very theory focused. And as gang violence was rising, we wanted to give young people like sort of an alternative to joining gangs. Instead of going and join an armed group, you could just come to our makerspace and we could teach you how to build a chair. And perhaps that's a skill that you can sort of use and capitalize on later on. So we've been kind of running lots of robotics and hands-on science session in the capital. And we are looking to expand into other parts of the country as well. But that's sort of like in a nutshell where my journey began with the foundation. Happy to kind of speak more about the specific programs, but now we've evolved into a more multi-dimensional organization in education in Haiti.
That's great. And it's just to point out to those of you tuning in, these are two individuals from two of the more difficult countries in which to operate, Afghanistan and Haiti, countries that have dealt with a mixture of poor governance and conflict. And for these two young people to have gone to an extraordinary effort to try to help their home countries and the people there, I think is something that we're celebrating today. I wanted to start with a question that you both touched a little bit on this, but I think speaking personally, I grew up as an activist, as interested in social justice, but there was a moment in which I decided I was going to be a humanitarian and that I was going to devote my life to humanitarian causes. And I've spent much of my career in Africa and the Middle East. And that was just the news stories about the Rwanda genocide. I'm 50 years old. Those stories came out when I was 19. It was like right at the age when I was ready to get angry about something. Seeing the level of violence and the inability of international institutions to do anything to staunch that violence or even provide the most basic protections for people on the ground really kind of was a gut punch and pushed me into a career. And I wonder for each of you, you've got very different experiences, and obviously I have a very different experience. Was there a moment, was there an incident you can point to? I'm sure there are many, but if there was one where it kind of just hit you, you know what, I have to translate, I care about this issue and I must act and do something about it. Maybe I'll start with Wilhem and then we'll go to Pashtana.
Yes, no, that's a great question. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, I sort of hinted at this a little bit. But in 2019, for those who don't know, we started having a lot of protests against the government then. And there was a term that came as like country lock. I mean, pays lock, that sort of like is the term. I don't know how that translated in English, where they basically would stop running any operation and boycott schools and any other economic activities in the country as a way to protest against the government. And back then in 2019, I think I attended school for about 5 out of the 12 out of the 10 months of school. And even then I was among the lucky ones. So I could imagine that students that had a dream, because in Haiti, sort of education is sort of your only way out of poverty. So people sort of manifest their idea to offer their family a different narrative through school. So being able to not be able to attend school is something that crushes most young people's dream. And I remember those times in Haiti in 2019, thinking about how difficult this must have been for other people, because that same year in 2019 is when I got my UWC scholarship. So when things started deteriorating, I was on my way out of the country. I was sort of like on a voyage to say like, okay, I'm truly getting a ticket to life, and there is no way I can waste that ticket. Obviously, I still care about offering my family support, kind of help them get out of this place at someday. But I also recognize that I had a responsibility because of how tremendously lucky I was by obtaining a scholarship at the time that was so crucial for my development. And then obviously things then deteriorated even more throughout the years of 2019, 2021 that led to the assassination of the president. But to me, the key moment was obtaining my UWC scholarship amidst all of these protests and recognizing that like I had a responsibility to be a change maker, even at a micro level, because again, I was going into a place that had a lot of resources and I could start thinking about ways I could channel some of these resources in Haiti, which again, sort of when I look back at my time at UWC, my whole experience was rooted in the idea of trying to be a change maker at a micro level and sort of make public service somewhat of a lifestyle so that like it didn't necessarily feel like work. I could just try to do something that I already knew. And the summer program with the foundation was the ideal place to start. We didn't have any money. We applied for Go Make a Difference, which is kind of like similar contests that most young people here probably know about. And we won $1,000. And with $1,000, we did the very first program. And then that was our point for us. But to go back to your question, it's truly sort of like leaving at a moment when you thought you were most needed, and starting to think about ways that you could do things and sort of do it at a small scale and to potentially build up.
Thanks, Wilhem. Really appreciated your answer. The importance of education, which obviously means a lot to Pashtana, given where she's from and what she does. So I'd love to hear the same question to you. What was that? Was there a moment, you talked a little bit about it earlier, but would love to hear kind of what inspired you to take on such a massive challenge, which is dealing with girls' education in Afghanistan.
It's very interesting. When Wilhem was talking about it, I was reflecting on my own journey and how in a way all of us have a same like foundational storyline, which is like we saw a need for ourselves and for our communities, and then we went ahead and believed in it and said, oh, okay, I'm going to show up for my people, you know. For me, I'm going to be honest, I have always been an angry person. I've just been angry at people, at the world, at all the inequality and injustice and everything. But also I'm going to be very honest, very privileged, because I grew up with a very feminist father. So for him, my anger was not wrong. It was the right way to express my feelings towards the world, and he made sure that I do it in the most expressive way possible. So I remember when I was young, like we had a huge table, and I had like 70 cousins. I come from a big Afghan family, and we were all eating, and my cousins, they would just talk over me every time, and I just couldn't shout at them, you know. And then my dad someday, he was like, you sit here with all these boys and talk here, are unable to talk. Imagine if you go into the the real world, and men are gonna just keep on talking on over you again and again, and they're gonna cut you. And the next day I just sat there, and I'm like a 7, 8 year old, and my cousin is 15-year-old, and he's speaking, and I'm just shouting at everyone. I'm like, no, listen to me. What happened in my day, that is important. And I think that is my first level of activism, I would say, for myself. Standing up to my own uncle when he said, oh, do you go to co-ed school? You're going to bring us bad name. And I was like, you know what? Maybe you should talk to my father and stop bullying me as a child, you know? But that was like my auntie telling me in the background, like, go tell him this, you know? And I had to be this person. So that's activism for me, for myself. But as I grew up, I saw my cousin. I went to Afghanistan, and she was never told to be angry. She was never told to be that person that I was for myself. So then I got angry for both of us, and I got angry for my community. And then I became this activist who went to the minister and said, well, you're kind of are corrupt and are taking our money, but not building schools for us. And I remember they were like, oh, well, you guys are tribal people. You don't need schools. You marry off your women at 13 anyways. And I got more angry. And I did all of this out of spite. But at the core of it, I think I saw that all these organizations, UNICEF, WHO, all these people have been in Afghanistan for decades and decades, and nobody could literally see just us as humans, that we needed a school beyond a project, beyond 6 months, beyond 12 months. We needed a lifeline, because as Wilhem said, this was our way out of poverty, out of all this instability, uncertainty. Now, to your question, I think there is a distinct difference between a humanitarian and an activist. We as
Yes.
activists, I think we're angry, but part of us transitions or graduate into humanitarianism when we realize how much this is needed all around the world and how much we are doing has to be seen with kindness and grace, and we have to see
Yeah.
ourselves with grace. And I think that's where I'm now transitioning into becoming a humanitarian, I would say this year, where I'm working with Yemeni midwives who are going through a similar issue like we are going through in Afghanistan, where women are graduating, but they can't graduate into a proper midwifery school. So there's like clandestine schools and programs for that. And I realized how much women have same issues all around the world: Afghanistan, Yemen, Syria, Haiti, Sudan, Somalia. And all of us have that same suffering. And I think that's where, for me, to graduate into that humanitarianism, I feel like, okay, no, I have to do this with kindness. I have to do this out of a place of love for other women in other parts of the world. So now I'm not as angry. I think I'm doing it more because I feel that love towards other people in need. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I loved your answer. I think part of what makes a humanitarian, there's always a little bit of anger in there, but
Yeah.
there's also a deep sense of humanism and a sense that every human is endowed with certain
Yeah.
rights and abilities and should have the opportunity to take advantage of those abilities. And for those of us, speaking for myself, who grow up, in the United States, in a country of great privilege, that responsibility, at least I felt, was even greater. And so, for me, going from being a young activist protesting against, conditions and racism against African Americans and the community I grew up in Minnesota, 10 years later, I'm in Darfur, doing humanitarian work and responding to the genocide, and I can see that through line. So, and what you both just articulated as well. So I'm going to start reading some questions that we took from in advance, and we have some others coming in, which I'll try to get to. But the first one is, and I think thinking about the scale of the challenges that you're tackling, what are the skills that you think are most essential for young humanitarians today? How do you measure whether the projects you are undertaking are truly making a difference? How do you measure impact? It's something I worry about every day as the director of impact. And what challenges do you think the next generation of humanitarian leaders will face? I think, you are kind of on the front lines of this, of a social movements. How do you think those are going to evolve? Obviously, we're at a time of tremendous change and turmoil in the world right now. And I'm sure you're both thinking about, okay, what does that mean for me and what I want to do in the world? So I'll call it Wilhem first, and Pashtana, you can follow up, and then we'll switch the other way.
Yeah. No, perhaps that's a question you should be answering for us, Colin, who's as the director of impact.
That's the director of impact.
But
Yes.
to kind of start from the first chunk in time, you talked about skills you have. When I think of my work, I think some of the skills that turned out to be most useful weren't necessarily sort of obvious to me. And the first one that comes to mind is sort of social consciousness. In terms of, when you're trying to do work in those spaces that are challenging, there is an element of understanding and empathy that needs to come first before you even think about how you lay out your solution. And one example is again, I think I'm still on the activist side. I don't think I've graduated into humanitarian level. But in Haiti in general, currently there is a lot of gang violence, and our makerspace is at the heart of the gang centers. So we are surrounded by gang on where the makerspace is. And when we were sort of developing this project, we needed to understand the environment in which we were going in and sort of put in contingency plans even before the project was done. And I think that came from me engaging with a lot of the locals, ask them questions about how do we react to a gang attack? If they say that we're not operating today, is that normal? Is that a thing we do? Do we fight? Do we resist? And a lot of the answers were coming to as in, you should actually make the project such that you're not here to resist. Our mission is to democratize the access to as many people as possible. But that doesn't mean that we have to democratize it every day. Someday will be dangerous, and you will put the people in your makerspace at risk. And at this point in time, it's actually not even worth trying to do the mission that you were set to do in the beginning. So to go back to kind of what I was saying is, a lot of it came from engaging locals. And I think I could have been fooled to say that, like, oh, I grew up in Haiti. I'm so aware. I know the country in and out, and I want to build a humanitarian project. I can just go and do it because I learned how to do it through the walls of MIT. So I think having that social consciousness was a key skill I had to develop. And again, that comes from engaging with the locals. The second thing that I thought was very useful to me was the ability to downsize. How do we take a problem and you try to think of the smallest way that you can address it while still preserving your own mental well-being, your own, saneness, because again, the problems are big, the problems are only going to get bigger, and the ability to sort of take it from the larger problem to something that's rich to you, something that you have the gift and the skills to do something about. I think that's extremely important. And on the second side of the question, you sort of talk about how those challenges will evolve. I think, at least from the Haitian side, I do see, instability and poor governance and gang violence probably proliferate through times. So in some ways, there are always going to be barriers to implementing that work in the country. However, I do also think that we only lose the fight when the day that we decide to sort of wave the flag and say that we're going to stop fighting. So despite kind of having that violence, I do think there's still a need to try to do the work in even at a small scale, and be able to sort of put up that resistance, because that resistance is our biggest force against those problems in the first place. And again, I have hope that things will be better someday, but that part of me also recognize that, like, the lane for us to get to that point isn't clear to us, because again, we've been independent for 200 years now, and those issues are issues that people who were writing in 1950 were also complaining about. So you sort of kind of get your reality check and recognize that there are still going to be those challenges, but how you interface with them is a combination of downsizing them, making them problems that are at reach, engaging people that are actually on the ground, that can do decisions that takes into account the context in which you're operating, and of course, sort of be ready to resist even when things are going to be challenging, sort of in the future.
Thanks for that. Before I turn to Pashtana, I just want to say I've been told there's a lot of hands going up from people who are on. If you have a question, please put it in the chat, and we will try to get to it. I've already got a couple that I'm going to get to next. But Pashtana, over to you on kind of how you're thinking about the challenges that might be coming down the pipeline. What skills are most essential for doing the kind of work that you do?
I think, as Wilhem said, the point of understanding and having a social conscience, but also like not claiming that you know everything just because you're from a place. I'm from Afghanistan, but Afghanistan has like almost 43 ethnicities, and we have almost 43 languages that we speak, and only 2 are like national languages. So I would never claim that I know someone in the north. I'm from the south. I do know my district. I'm a daughter of a tribal chief. I was taught and raised in that social consciousness, and also like the biggest the code for us is we have 3 ethnic codes, which is the first one is you have to be hospitable. The second one is you have to be someone who's welcoming people and protecting them, and the third one is sharing confidence, like keeping people secret. So for me, that's how I grew up. So my whole theory, the one educational moment for me was when I was young. We had this school in our house, and people would send their daughters. And my aunt, my father's sister, she would take attendance. And a few days, the girl didn't show up. My aunt takes me by the hand and goes to this house and knocks on their door, and they don't open up. And she's like, "Why are you not sending your daughter to school?" And she's shouting at them. And the woman from behind is like, "Oh, but the uncle is not allowing the girl to come to the school." And my aunt, she just bullied this person. She's like, "Well, if she doesn't show up to the school tomorrow, I'm going to send my brother." My other uncle, who's had anger issues, she was like, "I'm going to send my brother, and then we're going to sort out who's not going to send their daughters to school." And that was the moment where I realized sometimes you kind of have to bully people into sending their girls to school. And then there are other times where I have realized I cannot just go and show up in communities and ask them to send their daughters to school. Whenever we open up the enrollment programs, I have seen people send us literally their own national identity cards, their father's identity cards and their brother's identity cards, because those men in those communities want schools to be opened up, not for their daughters, for every girl in their community. And we have had 2,000 applications. Afghanistan is a small country. So 2,000 applications for 34 provinces is a big achievement.
Yeah.
So I think those are the two ways I would say that that education on when is the right time to push, when is the right time to give people the space to realize it on their own. But also, you have to think of yourself as someone who has to retire in service. So you have to serve. Like that has to be the goal
Yeah.
of it without you're losing your insanity, as Wilhem said. So take long walks, watch good movies, watch Eat, Pray, and Love.
Yes.
Take your time off.
Self-care.
Self-care is very important. Go to therapy.
Yes.
I go to it all the time. Transitioning into the question of challenges, like what are the sort of challenges that I see right now? I do think that there's going to be a lot of cut in resources. I think the next generation might not see as much as space for social activism, for even social movements, and any funding around it or any spaces around it. But it doesn't mean that you're losing allies. You have allies. You probably just need some more time and work to find those allies in those right spaces. So I think continue to speak up, continue to talk, continue to preserve your energy and your community's energy, but continue to engage. I think those are important things. And last, on impact, I have to give you one simple answer. We have 2,000 students, but those 2,000 students have 4,000 parents. Those are also getting educated with us, the mother and the father. They have almost 3 to 4 siblings. All of them are getting educated. So when you look at impact, don't look at it as this one person. This one person has a family, has a social circle, and all of them are being impacted by it. So kind of measure them as secondary beneficiaries, tertiary beneficiaries, but also as your ambassadors, as people who are going to carry your message and legacy. So ensure that it has that social, weight to it. Yeah, I'm going to stop here.
No, thanks for that. There's two things I think which I just want to pull from what you both said, or three things which I heard. One is adaptability. Understanding that the situations change, different situations have call for different solutions. The second I heard from both of you was humility, is going into a problem, not assuming that you have the answer or have all the information to even come up with the answer, and being able to listen. And third is empathy. I think, as a parent, this is what we all want our kids to grow up and be empathetic. I drill it into my kids every day, but it's putting yourselves in the shoes of other people, especially when you come from a position of privilege, and trying to understand, knowing that you can't fully embody what it means to be a refugee in Afghanistan, or living in a gang infested neighborhood in Port-au-Prince, but doing everything you can to try to put yourself there as a way to give yourself the motivation. I'm going to take a question from the chat. This is from Ryan, and this is a good question. I like this one. It says, many young people want to help, but they face social pressure or personal hardships at home. How do you stay focused on your humanitarian mission when your own environment is challenging? Either of you want to volunteer to tackle that one, or should I call? All right, Pashtana, go for it.
I can go. I have a very funny story. So when I started my activism and everything, but I have been writing for papers and op-eds since I was like 12. But I started formally protesting and going in front of embassies and going to ministers and throwing shoes at him and them and everything when I was like 17, 18. And I was accepted into a very prestigious school, and I declined it. And I was like, I'm going to take a gap here. And my mother would just throw slippers at me left and right. And this is like a Central Asian Afghan household where violence is okay when you beat your kids. And she was very much okay with it. She's like, I'm not going to let you throw away your life just because you think you can change the world. And I had to endure that for almost a year. Almost a year. I was a social pariah in my own house, where everybody's like, oh my God, she let go of her, college education, and she's doing a gap year and she's doing whatever that is. But I believed, I'm just going to be very honest. I was so self-centered. I was like, I believe in me. I am so good at this. I'm going to change the whole world. Maybe I have, maybe I haven't. I don't know. But I'm so glad I did that, because 4 years later, Afghanistan fell. And by the time Afghanistan fell, I couldn't stop Afghanistan falling, but I had so much social connections. I had so much trust built in the communities. So many people relied on that support system, but also sustained that support system. That when I picked up the phone when Afghanistan fell and I told them we're still going to open a school, 100 girls showed up, 30
Mm.
teachers showed up, and that grew into almost 18 to 19 schools in 18 provinces. And I have since gotten calls from provinces that I've never been to, ethnicities that I'm not even related to remotely. And they tell me, hey, we like what you're doing in the South. We want you in Central Highlands. We want you in North. We want you in the East. And that is just different kind of credibility. So sometimes I think you might have to give yourself the grace, like, charter those harsh times and hard times, even if it's your parents. Believe in yourself a little delululi, like you have to be delulu to believe in yourself. And then I think people are going to just show up for you. People are going to show up for you in so many different ways. Like, there was a time where a person who worked with me smuggled me from one province to another because the Taliban wouldn't let me get on a plane, and he did that on a broken foot. There was another time where they had to smuggle me across the border. People who got me my passports, people who got me my books because I couldn't access it, my laptops and stuff like that, people who still do all of that. So I think it definitely is, start believing in yourself, in your own strength, and then it's just going to multiply with every other person around you.
Wilhem, over to you to build on that. Great answer.
Yeah, no, that was fantastic. You're so inspiring, Pashtana. I guess I mean, right now, my biggest sort of fight with myself is because my family is still living in poverty, and I'm trying to do work, sort of like, I'm mobilizing funds to do things. I remember very, very vividly in 2022 when I started designing our makerspace to kind of. I just got in MIT, and I set foot in my very first engineering lab, and I was mind blown. I was like, we don't have those kind of things back home. We need to kind of have a makerspace too, so that young people who wants to do engineering or study science, kind of feel empowered that they can make things. We needed like $30,000 to build a makerspace, and in between 2022 and 2023. I raised about $32,000 at MIT, Boston, all kinds of project competitions and whatnot. In that same year, my parent made about $4,000 combined as like their total income for the year. So it was a shocking moment because I was like, I left my country, got a UWC scholarship. My goal is to get my family out of poverty. And I remember when I got my admission to UWC, my mom was sitting on that living room, and she was like, "Okay, we're finally gonna make it out." And 5 years later, all I've done is sort of like create a foundation that does educational work, and we are still sort of stagnating in the same level. So I wrestle with those questions all the time, and I think as much as there are issues back home, I realize that there is also importance in sort of living in something that is much greater than yourself, because I find a lot of value in sort of honoring my family's legacy by undertaking those projects, being able to sort of like offer opportunities to other people that are in as much need as my parents. I think is as valuable is actually also helping my family move along. Obviously, I don't lose sight of my family. I don't lose sight of my desire to sort of become somebody who is capable of supporting them in any shape or form. However, I separate the two because I think that both of these goals can flourish without necessarily jeopardizing them, and I can be a support to my family as much as I can be a support for other people that are in need. But again, if you are struggling with those kind of questions, I think it's totally legitimate. So you should definitely wrestle with them, but again, don't let them sort of get you blindsided in terms of what you can do, because it certainly is possible to sort of advance the two ways: supporting your family, dealing with problems back home, and also dealing with problems that are at sort of like at a larger scale.
Yes, juggling multiple commitments and multiple passions, I think, is a problem that anyone who does this kind of work shares. Because while you're an activist or a humanitarian, you're also a son or a mother or a father or grandfather. So we all do that in some way, shape, or form. But I think there are environments that are just fundamentally more challenging than others, and recognizing that you can walk and chew gum at the same time, as it were. I think this is a really powerful statement. Thank you for that, Wilhem. We've got two questions about technology, which I'm gonna jump into here. Obviously, technology has played for the past 15, 20 years with the internet, incredible role in bringing us together in some ways. Here we are online, but also it's been very divisive in other ways. How do you see technology playing a bigger role in humanitarian projects? And have you found that digital tools can actually teach deep values like empathy and forgiveness? And the last piece of this is, what is the biggest gap in current mental health technology? This is a very specific question. Current mental health technology that you wish a young developer like me would fix? Ooh, I might have some thoughts on that, but either of you want to jump in there? Pashtana, go for it.
I think I really resonate with the second question here, because as we transition into beyond grade 12, what is the future for girls in Afghanistan? We have been experimenting with 2 to 3 tracks right now, and those 2 to 3 tracks, the first one is midwifery. Post grade 12, 24 months, you sit in a clinic, you intern, you work, you show up, you learn, and then you become a midwife. And Afghanistan has a collapsed healthcare system, by the way, and women are not even allowed to have anesthesia right now in some certain procedures, because the Taliban wouldn't. But the second track that is very near my heart is becoming a mental health practitioner. Afghanistan has foundationally no access to mental health practitioners at all. We have very few, like throughout the country, I think we might have 60, 70. But overall, the problem that we have right now is also Afghanistan has the highest female suicide rate. Yesterday, a report was published that says that we have the highest depression and anxiety rate in women in Afghanistan. And these are UN reports that have been continued to develop for the past 4 to 5 years. So my goal has been for the past 1.5 years to figure out what can technology, especially AI, do in helping us, fill this gap where we cannot even diagnose people the right way. We're just asking them questions and then assuming that they're either depressed or anxious. And then what could be the treatment? So right now at Learn, we are trying to experiment with almost 200 girls that are transitioning beyond grade 12 into this sector of A, becoming mental health practitioners, B, also experimenting with an AI tool that is dedicated to mental health diagnosis. So you basically, if you're in Afghanistan and your name is Sumaya, you're going to pick up a call, you're going to call this number, and you're going to answer a few questions. And once you're done with that, the AI is going to run diagnosis on you. But once done that, you're no more with an AI. You're going to be sent to a mental health practitioner that was graduated through a Learn program, and you can talk to them. And that's something that you can do regularly on regular basis. And I think for us, it has worked out. It still is, of course, an experimentation phase, but it's working out. Why? Because now people don't feel that they have to go out of their way to Iran and Pakistan to seek mental health services, or they have to be Americans. They don't have to be speaking English. They can be speaking Uzbeki. They can be speaking Turkmen and still be able to access their own mental health services. So I think keeping in mind those gaps of languages, those gaps in data. If you go to ChatGPT and tell them I'm having a bad day, they're going to tell you take a walk outside. Women in Afghanistan are not allowed to take a walk outside. So you see the gap, So I think just thinking of those ways, thinking of putting yourself in shoes of an Afghan woman or a woman in Sudan or Somalia or Yemen, where they can't just take a walk outside and stuff like that. So that would be my answer to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to jump to you, Wilhem, but it made me think of the ways in which some technologies can actually just jump over others. In the sense, I'm thinking about banking in Africa, where you had for decades, very few people actually had formal bank accounts, but with phones and online banking, suddenly banking becomes an accessible service for people that live hundreds of miles from a bank. So it's these types of technologies. At one point, the cell network in Somalia was known as the best in the world because they had no landlines that were really functional. And so out of necessity, And because there was no regulation, companies went in and built these incredible cell networks. So it's a question of sort of opportunity matched up with the right technology. I'm taking a lot of moderators' time here. So Wilhem, would love to hear your thoughts on technology.
Yeah, no, I mean, you guys shared a lot of great things. So I'll just add one piece. And I think, I use technology all the time, and especially with our work, we are very much focused on tech in general. But the only thing I would say for people that are trying to integrate as much technology as possible is to obviously recognize that there is a huge educational gap. Oftentimes there's going to be a big gap between users and between sort of like access in general. So if you are driving work and you are bringing technology to sort of address humanitarian issues, you need to be cautious to maybe not further expand the gap that already exists among people. At least in Haiti, there is already such a divide, among classes, among people who attend school, people who know how to, whether they can speak French or not, or just basically social divide that has grown over years. And when we do our projects, we try to kind of have everybody work in pairs. And sometimes you see one kid come with their own laptop, and then someone else, their other partner doesn't have a laptop, and we sort of give them a laptop. But then as much as like, okay, we give them a laptop, but then the student actually doesn't know how to use a laptop. Never seen a laptop before. So there is these kind of like dynamics that played out where I'm like, am I doing a disservice to the kid who doesn't have a laptop by pairing him with somebody who has a laptop? Are there ways I should be thinking about those things in a way that so that I don't harm the student even more by thinking that I'm trying to address his issue or their issue? So the only point I would say, I think definitely there is a lot of space for technology to democratize knowledge. I have courses currently that we're offering that are being taught at MIT, and they are now being taught in Haiti as well simultaneously without having to bring people from MIT to teach. So there are lots of ways of like how we can sort of expand knowledge that was sort of like centralized and kept secret. Now people can have access to them more easily through educational platform, things like Coursera and stuff like that. But then the only thing I would say is just making sure that we are still carrying that context with us as we are addressing those issues, because we don't want to create even more divide by introducing things that people don't, can't handle already.
Yeah, both your answers made me think of the importance of language, and you're obviously both people who speak multiple languages. I've worked in different places in the world, and just learning a local language, being able to communicate with people, even at the most basic level, in their own language, is a way of demonstrating empathy, as a way of showing you're trying to meet them where they are. And so as we think about technology that's being developed by American companies and European companies and Chinese tech companies, how those actually get translated into effective tools in other languages is going to be so important. We're running up on time, so I want to give you guys each a minute or so to answer this last question. And this is one that we received beforehand. How can students who are just starting to get involved in a humanitarian or activist project do their work in a realistic way? As a student, and here's the second part, as a student trying to fund a dream project, which I love the idea of a dream project, what's your biggest piece of advice? So as we kind of danced around this, we're here to try to inspire others to follow in our footsteps as activists and humanitarians. What would you say to the audience out there as your top advice to them going forward? Wilhem, start with you.
Yes. Yeah. I guess I have three things. I guess probably because some of these things have come through what I've shared before. And the first thing is to start small. Starting small is the key to me on how you build things. And perhaps I'm a little bit biased. I'm an engineer, and they talk about degrees of freedom when you're building things, when you're trying to you don't want to be controlling 1,000 things at once, especially when you're starting. Starting small convinces yourself that things can be done. you might be thinking about the problem and you try to address it more specifically, downsize it. If you are thinking of a project for 120 people, how about you start with 20 people? It was gonna have multiple component dimensions. How about it has one component and then you convince yourself that it can be done, and then from there you start small, you do it well, and then you expand. I think that was key for me into starting. What the foundation is today isn't even what I could even imagine it would be back in 2019 where we were starting. However, it did not matter because the principle was there and we wanted to do something right in the education space. The second piece of advice that comes sort of like, from you wanting to fund your dream project and whatnot is to ask for help. I think people are more willing to help than you think. And more recently, I actually found an article sort of on climate change. They went to this neighborhood and they asked everybody, what percent of your income do you think you would dedicate to solve climate change? And people would be like, maybe like a 10%, 15%. And then they would ask them, what percent of your neighbor's income do you think they would be willing to dedicate? And on average, people were like less than 1%. But most people actually were saying they would be willing to, give 10%. So don't underestimate the fact that there are people out there who actually wants to help. And when you ask for help, the worst thing that can happen is they say no to you. That's okay. And people would sort of help you start how to make whatever, like an invoice, how to write an email properly, how to phrase a thing such that you could raise some capital. And on the note of like sort of funding projects in general, I genuinely think that like you need to start working with what you have. So kind of looking at communities where you are and what are the resources that are at hand that you can start channeling towards your project. I was at UWC, and when I was at UWC, I was applying to things like Go Make a Difference, small scale, but I still won them and got to make impact there. Transition to MIT. At MIT, I applied to every single fellowship that ever was in that Boston area, and I won some, I lost some. But then again, that was the space in which I was. Now I'm in the UK, same thing. Now it's like different stages. There are different resources that are around me. How can I channel those things? So I would suggest that you keep your eyes open on opportunities of funding or people in general and ask for help. Those are sort of the three things that I would say. And then the last bit is just recognizing that, you're a change maker already. You can be a change maker at the micro level within your family, within your friend group. So just try to keep nurturing that idea that public service will be your lifestyle, and sort of make daily choice as a public servant is very, very important.
Thanks very much for that, Wilhem. Pashtana, our closing word on
It's very hard to follow Wilhem on this one. I think he said everything very
hard to follow both of you.
rightly. I think the first thing I have to see is, and I have always believed in this, is believe in yourself like a child. Believe in yourself when you were 5-year-old. I wanted to be president of Afghanistan. Did I become one? Not necessarily. Do I run
Still possible. Still possible.
Do I run the biggest network in Afghanistan of underground schools that focuses on girls' education? Yes, I do. So believing in yourself like a child. Stop letting the negativity around you get in through your light. And I think it's, as activists, as humanitarians, we have to carry light inside of our hearts for us to make this work possible, because everything around us is telling us this is not worth it. This is not something you should be investing in. So believe in yourself like a child. Second would be read so much. Like I went back to the book that I was reading in Afghanistan, which is The Education of an Idealist by Samantha Power, and she was talking about like Ebola, right, and how she was going around the world and went through the worst time where her own child was like, don't go there. Like he was scared for her, and then she still went. And then Ebola went out, like it was not anymore an epidemic. So imagine like being able to bring in so many people and being able to do that. And then I think to myself, I'm like, if she can do it, I can do it. So read on other people, read on other people's missions and challenges and how they came into doing all of this. God knows how many times I have read about women in Afghanistan and how they have fought like people invaders. And I'm like, my women, so read more. And also I think invest in other people, the reason I'm not talking about other community stuff, because I think Wilhem covered it. The one thing I would say is invest in yourself and your own skills. Seek mentorship, seek spaces. It's okay to not know everything. It's okay to not being able to answer every question. It's okay if you don't understand how to write an email to a big donor or a practitioner or someone that you are inspired by. Still do it. Still show up. The worst they can say is no. The worst you are not going to be given is a space to talk, but you learn. So I think being very okay with learning in uncomfortable situation just makes you very comfortable with doing your work. And I think that has to be something that you have to carry with yourself.
Yeah, I think finding inspiration to what you just said, Pashtana, is maybe the most important thing, or has been for me. And you mentioned Samantha Power, and I worked for her for 8 years. And working for someone who inspires you is the best antidote to feeling unhappy and useless at work, because you go in every day and you're like, if this person's charging ahead amidst all these problems, I can do it too.
Yeah.
Speaking of inspiration, you are both inspirations. I want to give a huge shout out to you for sharing your stories with us and with our audience out there. You've shown that change making isn't just about change, or isn't just about age, excuse me. It's about courage, creativity, and a refusal to accept that this is just the way things are. So to everyone watching, let's turn those ideas into action. Before I introduce Radha Pillay, I want to say one more thing. At Aurora, we've just launched a program called the Aurora Research Grants. It's a stipend-supported program that invites participants to research and document the work of grassroots humanitarians, like people that Aurora supports, who are risking their lives in often violent contexts to save other people. So applications are open. You can apply via the link we've shared in the chat. I hope that happened. Or you can reach out to the organizers of this call with any questions. With that, I'd like to welcome Radha Pillay, who's the Director of Education at UWC, to offer some closing remarks and thoughts. And again, thank you to our panelists and to UWC for co-hosting this with us. Radha.
Thank you. I'm going to race against the clock. It's been a privilege to listen today. And as you rightly pointed out, Colin, we are living in a time when humanitarian challenges are growing in scale and complexity, and it affects the daily life of millions of people. We've heard that education carries responsibility that goes beyond knowledge and qualification. It needs young people to make sense of complexity and to act with care and responsibility in response. I especially appreciated the differentiation you made, Pashtana, between activism and humanitarianism. Hearing about the courageous actions of Pashtana, Wilhem, and the compassionate and generous efforts of Colin and the Aurora Humanitarian Initiative today gives us a great deal of hope. We've seen them engaging seriously with the challenges around them, not with ready-made answers, but with curiosity, creativity, and a very strong sense of connection to their communities. Their work reminds us that youth leadership in humanitarian action isn't about waiting for permission. As Wilhem so eloquently put it, it's about listening closely, understanding local realities, and being willing to try, learn, and adapt. That matters because the future of humanitarian work will be driven by people who are comfortable working across difference, who can hold uncertainty, and who are prepared to collaborate and never to compete. Those capacities don't emerge by chance. They develop over time through experience, reflection, and trust. At UWC, we see education as preparation for this responsibility, and we work with deliberately diverse learning communities where young people bring very different lived experiences into the same space. In those settings, students are challenged to consider local and global issues and how they show up in people's lives, including their own, and what it means to respond with the integrity we've heard today. And with the help of partnerships like the one between Aurora Humanitarian Initiative and UWC, we can bring together shared values around youth leadership, practical action, and education rooted in real world impact. And we've heard a lot about impact today. Together, we can create the conditions for young people to learn from one another and turn ideas into meaningful change. And as we close, I hope what stays with us is this sense of possibility grounded in what young people are doing already and in what education can make possible when it is thoughtful, inclusive, and courageous. Thank you all for joining us. Special thank you to Pashtana, Wilhem, and Colin for being part of this conversation and for the commitment you've all shown to shape the future of humanitarian action. Take care and stay light.